Kia ora everyone, and welcome back for councillors that are just returning. Welcome to anyone else that is tuning in to the live stream. Just as a reminder to anyone in the room, this meeting is being recorded and live streamed and is the first of our workshops to be recorded and live streamed. We are going to start talking about our next annual plan budget for 26-27. The team have done a lot of work already in the background and a lot of work to meet the direction of council that we've heard throughout the election process of affordability being a key priority. So I'd now like to pass over to Tracy, Sarah and Hamish to run us through the presentation.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. I'll predominantly work us through the slides that you've had shared with you, so you've already had a preview, adding a couple more tidbits as we go. As we drill more into any detailed questions that you may have, Sarah will jump in and talk to the technical working of the numbers underneath. Anything to do with capital will be Hamish discussing and going through those, and potentially Michael, depending on how much detail you would like to go into. So I've just thrown some slides together. The first one is showing us what we're going to be doing in this workshop today. So we'll present you the timeline of the annual plan / budget. We still need to do the final headroom calculations. However, we do have some interim numbers on those as well for you now today. The accumulated debt planning, that's in regards to funding versus depreciation funding, which we'll talk to in more depth as we go through as well. We're going to ensure the alignment of delivery of the year 3 of the LTP is comparable to the annual plan of 2027. We'll focus on the agreed budget and the rates increases. We'll provide an overview for key factors which are impacting the annual plan 27. We'll highlight the current special reserves that are still available on the balance sheet. Hamish will also go into more depth around service impact discussions if the discussions and the questions lead us to those points. And then we'll be finishing up with elected members' input for any focus areas over and above what we've already focused on to take into account for us to go away with. And we'll gather all that feedback formally from you guys so that we can come back with anything we need to. Okay. So this is the timeline. It's indicative. It's not hard and fast. We have to publish by June 26. Today's the 17th of December, whereas our first chat. We've already done quite a lot of work with Mayor Scott, CE, ELT team, with rate capping in the back of our minds. We've already worked really hard towards that. So we want to present to you today a really robust, heartfelt, affordable rates plan for 27 today. That's where we're coming from today. You will have these are the other things that will be going on in between. So we've got the elected members 2-day workshop at the end of Jan. That's another opportunity to talk about annual plan if you so wish. There's another opportunity in February as well where we can do further drill down workshops again if you wish. We may need to go into consultation or engagement depending on any views from the elected members. At this stage, the one we're presenting to you has not veered significantly enough away from LTP for formal consultation. However, again, what the elected members would like us to do in regards to engagement with the community around this, we'll go through as well. And the opportunity can be there in February and March. April, final approval. We'd like the numbers to stop moving potentially as soon as we can, because for this plan, we have the normal annual plan. We actually have to create 5 sets of accounts by a formal publishing in June. We need 6 to 8 weeks to be able to build models once the whole annual plan numbers stop moving. and we have finalised exactly where we want them to land, then we have to recreate an individual set of accounts for each of the three waters, an aggregation of the three waters together, and without the three waters. So there's a lot of work to go in behind the scenes once the numbers have actually finalised. So that's our high-level plan. We can work with it however you want us to. So, big highlights. There's our last long-term plan. So for year 3, which is the annual plan for 27, we published in the long-term plan that we were going ahead with an 11.84% increase. We can talk to how we got there. Sarah can talk to that further down if you'd like, further down the presentation, because it was about rate smoothing, it was also about COVID, and it was also about where we were in the years coming into those periods as well. And then once we smoothed those first 3 years of LTP, then it was an indicative spend moving forward into the final years. Those final years were based on an assumption of the same capital expenditure each year with a inflationary factor in it. So we've got a proposed annual plan figure of 5.36. The savings is derived from the removal of the depreciation from the three waters. So for this current year, we've said we won't fund depreciation because we feel that all the capital planning up to close of 2026 is sufficient to, at this stage, what we believe to be in line with our water supply planning. That's still being scoped by Peter to make sure that it's falling within those requirements. And also just to note, for us, short accruing the depreciation reserve this year for the three waters won't mean that the community will then be experiencing extensive equipment infrastructure builds within the first few years that they go across, because they are going to be under strong regulatory standards of service, which will not allow them to completely escalate away from where we are. And we are happy that if we're inside our water supply agreement, then we're going to leave those assets in a good state for the water services to take them on. Okay, so just to go through some, the strategic combination, how we got from the original 11.84 to 5.36. So it was levels of depreciation for capitalisation, levels of external borrowings. We've revisited a bit of our capital expenditure plans for 2027, and we had zero increase in operational overheads, which is significant. It means that internally the council took overhead management and efficiency very seriously when we raised these budgets.
Thanks, Tracy. Just a quick question. Would you prefer questions throughout or at the end? What would be your preference?
I wouldn't mind going, because it's only a few slides, going through and then going back one by one, I think would be a good way to do it, because I think it's contextual, the whole thing. Yeah, that's good. And the service level remains unimpacted with the strategic changes that we've made from 11 to 5.36. I don't know if we can make that any bigger, but you've got your own copies there as well. So that's the drivers by activity line between the 11.84 down to the 5.36. So you may have some questions around that in a bit more detail there, which we'll come back to for those. Okay, so annual plan. So I just wanted to bring it into context. So the change from 26 to 27, so we're going up 5.36% for the 27 plan. It's actually a savings on the annual plan, 11.84 minus 5.36 of the 6.48%. So we managed to save 7.16% in debt management and depreciation capitalisation programs, and the zero increase in operational overheads. To bring it down to that 5.36, we needed to bring back a $750,000 reserve that's sitting in our balance sheet, which effectively is money put away for another day. That gave us another 1.8% saving on the rates and took it down from 7.16 to the 5.36 that we're presenting to you today. The reason we were able to do that is there was a sale of investment that the council had, which Sarah can talk to in a little bit more detail shortly, that had generated $750,000 profit for council, which was put into reserves for a time when we felt it was necessary that we wanted to use that. That's been put in against the roading, which has helped facilitate payment down of loan borrowings, and that's how we've managed to receive that extra advantage. As I was just saying there, we still need to do the headroom, but once the numbers finish, it'll be finalised, but we've got some good numbers that Sarah will update you on when we're done, which shows us that with all these changes, we are well and truly within our headroom. So us leveraging off depreciation and debt is in no way putting us at risk of being over-geared on our balance sheet. The other thing is that we've taken this view for the 27 plan, maybe a little bit more forceful than what have been in past, with potentially capital renewal through depreciation and external borrowings. Short-term view for the 27 plan to set us in good stead towards the rates capping and lead us into the stringent LTP planning process that we're about to embark on, which will be a process that we all know will be looking for affordability in the rates with inside the capping and all the other regulations that are coming out with system improvements and everything else. So that's inevitable to be coming out in our LTP, and this is our first lead into it, coming from 11 down to 5. Yes, please. So we just wanted to give you a quick snapshot of reality of what the rates look like for our community. So we'll go to the right one first. So that's the total cost of the rates for 2027. That's the percentage of each of the categories that hold their contribution to the total cost. So in other words, if the rates were $100, then it'd be 4.1, 7.09, $9.92, and so on. So it's always a little bit harder to read once you get it on these things, but our main spending is that should be transportation and Three Waters currently is where our major spends are. That's capital and operational costs. Then if you go across to the left, this is just the increase. So what is making up the increase of the 27 plan from the 26 plan? So of the 5.36, we have Three Waters that is fairly well contributing a very, very small amount this time. We have all our other operational costs outside of finance costs, capital costs and roading costs, only contributing 2% of the cost of the council. These graphs are to depict that, I hope it gives the community reassurance that the operational expenditure in council to keep the entity running is sound and efficient and cost effective, and we focus on the job of infrastructure and funding that infrastructure growth and renewal. This is just another way of looking at it. So that's our 5.36. That's effectively what the graph's telling us. That's the contribution per activity, just in another view there of how much the contribution is per activity across the region. So we can probably skip through this one. The main thing I was talking to here was about the 750 reserve that we just spoke about before, wanting to highlight the operational efficiency. The accumulated depreciation, we spoke about that in the workshopping around what depreciation funding is in our rates for capital expenditure. We're fairly well as a total spend for the year, have unfunded 38% of our depreciation. Of that, most of that, 20-odd% is all about the roading subsidy that we get. And then in the current year, 52% of just for this year has been unfunded out. But again, 40-odd% of that is because of the roading subsidy that we receive. We've applied all the standard levers that we normally do, maybe a little bit more aggressive. Well, we have been around the waters. We've got the 750 reserve, which has helped us to achieve a more favourable result in a more stable way. The 750 we're using, we believe, will not create risk for usage in the future that we may have earmarked for it. We didn't have it earmarked for anything. We think this is a great time to be bringing that out for our community. Yeah, I think we're nearly there. So just to give you assurance, capital planning. So there's our annual plan for 27, 35 million. The LTP was 43. We took out 7.9 as a variant. Technically not significant changes from a financial perspective. And those are the reasoning running down the side there. Again, Mike, Hamish and Sarah can talk to those in more detail if you're wanting a bit more of a specific. The point of this was not to show you what the capital projects are, because it's effectively say what we've got in the LTP still remains exactly as we had anticipated it to be, apart from these removals here. And then there's your 35 million there for 2027, and that's how it's going to be spent: growth, level of service and renewals. And our special reserves. So that's just to give you a reassurance that there is some money in the jam jars, that we will probably be doing a good deep dive on those for the LTP. That's the point of this slide, is also just to give you confidence that if we've been slightly more aggressive in our depreciation funding through rates and more towards external borrowing, we still have plenty of money in the bank for rainy days and for council to reach out to. So before we go into feedback and da-di-da, should we go back to the top for any questions first? Which would you like to drive that side of it, Scott?
Thanks very much for a start for all the work that has gone into this, and I'll open up for questions in a second, but I'm quite keen to set the scene a little bit, and then I will have an opening question. And I'm very grateful for the collaboration that has gone into bringing this together. I think for all of us, the message that we heard loud and clear from our community was affordability is a real priority for the people that we serve. The projected 11.84% increase in our LTP was just simply unaffordable for a lot in our community, and we need to respond, and it's great to see a strong response that's just been presented. For us to really shift the dial for affordability and for future rate capping, that is going to require some big conversations in our long-term plan. We are going to have to look at every service we provide, how we provide it, or whether we provide it at all. And they will be conversations we have to have with our community. Our ratepayers, though, can't wait for that conversation before some of this relief comes. We need to be able to provide that to them now. We also need to make sure and show our community that we are pulling every lever available to us. But this budget should not be about trying to do a mini long-term plan. Our focus has to be on the upcoming long-term plan where those key changes are going to be made. So I think that we strike a good balance with this. I was very pleased to see the 0 for operational overheads that came in. In effect, that isn't a 0, that is a decrease found through efficiencies. So I just want to make that clear to our community as well. One of the key aspects that have been presented is the use of some reserve funding to help offset rates. This gives us a little bit of breathing room as we develop the LTP. My view is it is better to sit there instead of just sitting in a bank account. It is a good opportunity to use it for the purpose it's meant to be used for on roading, rather than sitting in the bank and then us going back out to our ratepayers for more. But it's also important to note that you can't keep doing that once it's been used. It's been used, so it makes it even more incumbent on us to get the process in the LTP right. The sustainability that we will have to get in our long-term plan isn't just desirable, and it is desirable, but it isn't just desirable, it is going to be a necessity for us to meet our legal obligations coming out of rate capping. I am very, very grateful to staff for the work that has gone into this. I think we still potentially have some work to do. I think this is a really good start. I do want to mention quickly, there was some talk about, and it's up on the slide now, of consultation versus engagement. My natural instinct is always to look at how we engage and how we consult with our community. This may be slightly different in the sense that levels of service are not changing. And actually, we just went through quite a large consultation process, which was called an election. So it's something for us to consider as well. So my first question, that was just wanting to set the scene a little bit and to thank the team, because make no mistake, there has been significant work that has gone into this plan. But my question is there any way that we can go further to provide further relief, and what might that look like? The 5.36 that was presented surprised me when I first saw it in a positive way, to be able to move from the 11.84, but we're all very ambitious, so I'd like to hear what you might have to say.
Right, so we have two further scenarios we can run. So we pulled the levers firm in finance to where we felt we were giving great financial advice. The next two levers are about governance and decisions around governance. We can drop the 2% repayment, probably only by 0.2%, which will get us the money, extra money needed, extra benefit into the rates increase to bring it down to just below 5. We can also, which we're looking into at the moment, which is another governance strategic decision, is waters. We are paying down debt as per what our water plan had inferred, and so we've followed the same pattern we have for the last 2 years into this year, believing that that was what the essence of the water supply plan wanted us to do. With the calculations that will be done going into the WISCO, there is actually a formal calculation which will give a tick of approval at the time of merging or creation, or however you want, merging us into them, which will take into account debt, capital, renewal, reserves, and revenue. That's just come to light that there may actually be a mathematical calculation that will help us actually be able to work out whether we will actually be sound and not just so subjective about whether we're actually meeting our plans. We may be able to get a mathematical calculation around that as well to then say, well, we will reduce the payment of debt into waters only, actually wastewater only. Either of those will get us below 5.
Thanks very much for the clarification. Also, just important to add, and I'm sure this will be shared by all elected members, is whatever decision we make, we want to be financially sound. So I just want to be clear on that. I do just want to quickly mention the accelerated debt repayment, which for people that have been following along is something I've always been quite passionate about. However, I am interested in what that opportunity could look like. One of our key drivers for that was making sure that we stayed within our headroom. So some of those headroom calculations will become really important for what impact that 0.2 or that 0.2% might have on it. For me, if it has a material impact, then I would be concerned. But appreciate knowing that there are perhaps some ability to move in some other scenarios, and a credit to the three of you for having that ready. Councillor Naylor was the first to indicate he wanted a question, so I'll hand over to him.
Yeah, just quite simply on slide 5, are we? Yeah, slide 5, we talk about levels of external borrowings. I assume that means an increase in the levels of external borrowing to get the cost down. Is that?
It was it was more around not paying back debt. Yeah, and that's outside the 2%. We also had some internal KPIs that we wanted to do in regards to paying back debt per activity, and we reduced those in this plan.
And one further question was, I see you've revisited capital expenditure plans. Can't remember where I saw it, but I thought I saw there was still a plan for capital expenditure of about $5 million on waters this annual plan. Does that sound right? Or
I'll let Hamish talk to that.
Yeah, yes, we still have committed projects underway in the capital space for Three Waters. They're things that we're obliged to do, projects that we have Environment Court decisions on and consent conditions that we have to adhere to. So, yeah.
Very good. Are you finished with those questions? Thanks, Councillor Naylor. Any further questions? Councillor Amboy.
Thank you, Mayor Scott, and thank you, team, for this very detailed report. Just on slide 6, the 2027 annual plan / budget, and it's very detailed. Do we know any of the services that are detailed here that we will lose since the System Improvements Bill has been put into legislation? Thanks.
Just very, very quickly, I think, Councillor Amboy, that's probably a separate conversation. What we are needing to deal with now is really looking at year 3 of the long-term plan and the budget response from the team based off our direction. So I think we have to look at the levels of service as described in the long-term plan.
Could I just add to that? It is so tempting to jump into LTP mind frame, and we've been very disciplined as a team and working with Malcolm to keep them quite separate, because there's so much we want to talk about for the future of our ratepayers, and the 27 plan is really where we want to say we're sitting really safe and sound to now start that process. Yeah.
Deputy Mayor Wards.
With your discretion, Mayor Scott, I'm going to have a bit of a dig around and ask some. Can I take you to slide, it's on page 9, the annual plan outline that has a number of columns that I get excited about, increasing, decreasing, etc., etc. Given the context that you'd provided, Tracy, I was a little surprised to see, and this is why I need to check, the column that's got green at the top of decrease, are those the ones that where we have actually managed to decrease our rates, our rate take? So a decrease, those are the main influences on our decrease from 11.5, is that correct? So I was a little surprised to see how few there were in that column.
Sorry to interrupt you. Through your worship, it's the decrease from the 26 annual plan, which differs from the long-term plan.
Yeah.
That's what that is, not the long-term plan. Just wanted to, not from the 11.84.
Yeah, okay.
From your 7
From the 11 to the 5, yeah, I get that.
Okay.
However, I was still curious to understand why there are elements in there where I thought, why do we need to decrease those? There's other ones that I would have questioned, why haven't we decreased them? And I'll give you a couple of examples. So let's go to libraries under community facilities and services. So we have a figure in there where there's an increase in there of 83,000. So given all of the rationalisation of services and how we're trying to bring them together to make some savings, I'm curious to understand why there are increases in areas like that. So I wrote down the fact that the decreases in our rates are mainly due to community buildings, public conveniences, animal management, compliance and monitoring, footpaths and water supplies. Those are core services, and looking at this, I'd be challenged to think, you know, for instance, under community development, we have an increase in our rates. Just seeking some clarification.
Thank you. Through your worship, excellent question, Deputy Mayor. Most of these increases that you're seeing, well, actually all of these increases you're seeing in the community development example, the libraries example, these are all coming from your treasury and support activity. So I'm just going to take you back a step. Your operational costs have actually decreased, I think it's by 170,000. That's your personnel, that's your power, that's your maintenance. That's across the entire organisation. Significant work the team did, and I need to just thank everyone in the ELT for that amount of work. What has increased in this plan is the interest costs because our debt has increased. What has also come into this is an increase in your depreciation costs. You'll recall in the 25 annual report, we did a significant amount of capitalisation, particularly in our roading space, which has seen the cost of our depreciation increase. Granted, we only rate for our portion of that, but that has an impact. And then the other main driver, which is why you're seeing the decrease in the community buildings, because that sticks out quite clearly, doesn't it, is because year 3 of the LTP, we had rate smoothing in the 22-23 annual plan. In the 24-34 long-term plan, we unfunded a significant amount in year 1, and we were repaying it in year 2 or year 3 to keep under that 12%. Everything has come home in year 3. So I just really wanted to stress that. So that's where you're seeing this additional unfunding and depreciation, or this reduction to the community buildings. It's these loan repayments from our rate smoothing exercises coming home to roost, so to speak. Has that answered your question? Thank you.
That was a very, very good answer, so thank you, Sarah. Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Mayor Scott. Yeah, of that 5.36, 4.2 of it is roading, isn't it?
Yes. So through your worship, that
all
is
the rest of point 0.1, 0.2, you know,
so that is where the
minuscule amounts.
Yeah,
You
that
know,
is where
roading is the big one.
Roading, I think, has a movement of a $950,000 loan repayment from these unfunding scenarios that's occurred, that we're proposing to utilise the Infracon proceeds to offset, which is the $750,000 reserve movement. we are not recommending to touch the depreciation in that activity. Given the amount of resilience work we're doing, I think it would be to a significant disadvantage to us, especially moving into a rates capping environment, to touch that depreciation in that space.
But even with that 750,000 or whatever it is from Infracon, it's still 4.2% of the 5 point.
In the bottom line there, the reserve adjustment in this graph hasn't been applied to that roading activity yet. Yeah.
Take the 1 point.
Thank you for that. Councillor Petty-Webber.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. So looking ahead, and I know this is probably a long-term plan conversation, so we won't have 750,000 next year. Is that where we look at levels of service and your other levers that you've been talking about to bring the rates down to the rates capping area?
Is this for next year?
Yes.
Yes, long-term plan, again, lots and lots of work to be done in the long-term plan. Oh, sorry.
No, and you're absolutely right. But I do want to keep this conversation focused on the annual budget for this. But it is an absolutely fair question and reflection, and underscores a little bit more of what I mentioned. For this, I think we can here get a very good outcome for our community, but for that to be sustainable, we have to acknowledge around this table that we are going to have to find some significant savings and change the way that we are doing things. And I see this as a bit of a two-part process. We keep levels of service where we consulted and agreed with the community, because that's the commitment we made when we went through the long-term plan. But then we have an opportunity as a team with our community to figure out where to next to make sure that that's sustainable. So I think it was a really fair question, and the short answer is you're right. Councillor Wards. Oh, sorry, Deputy Mayor Wards.
Thank you, Mayor Scott. Just a quick one while we're talking about Infracon. Are there any criteria or factors where that reserve can be spent? Is it across the board or just on roading?
It was with our internal advisement of that reserve, we believed it was rightly put against roading. Yeah.
Just a couple of comments from me, and I kind of want to check this is not a decision-making meeting, by the way, and actually nor are we anywhere near the point where we will be making formal decisions. However, I am quite keen just to make sure that the team has sufficient direction on where they've headed. From my perspective, like I said before, I think this is a good start. I think we still have more conversations to come. I am very, very keen to understand the risks and opportunities from the two other scenarios that you mentioned, Tracy, and I think so we can look at making some informed decisions. But I think this is something our community can be very, very pleased to see, that they've been heard, that staff and the elected team are working very, very hard to be delivering that affordability question. Are there any further questions or comments, knowing that this will be coming back to us? From the staff team, are there any further comments that you wish to make on the annual budget or on the presentation?
Cyril, just talk to us about the headroom calcs that we've got with what we've got so far.
Thank you, Tracy. Through you, Your Worship, I have the headroom calculated under 3 different scenarios. The first is at the 5.36. Council will meet all of its benchmarks and it will be well under its financial headroom. So we have 4 measures for our financial headroom. The first is that the debt is less than 175% of total operating revenue. We will come at 139. And if there is an unfunding of debt, accelerated debt repayment, or increase in the Three Waters debt space, so to speak, the rates impact would be roughly around $200,000, and that would bring the rates down to 4.8-ish, give or take. and the headroom will have minimal change at 140. The third scenario that I have run is with the debt being repaid at 30 June 2027 for 3 waters, and that brings our headroom right back down to 34%. Do you want me to carry on with the rest? The rest are all within COE of our benchmarks, but I just really wanted to. I know Council, Deputy Mayor Wards and yourself, Your Worship, are extremely invested in the headroom, and I'm sure the new elected members will be too.
Thank you, Sarah, and you are correct in that. Although I do look forward to seeing those figures reported, so we can also share those with the community. Tracy.
Yes, I'll just add to that, 34%, yes, but there could be other mitigating factors which take some of that shine off, but definitely good numbers to be talking to now.
Councillor Johns.
Thanks, Scott. After Water's debt repayment, what is our headroom at that point? How is that calculated?
We go from being 140% of our maximum 175. We go from 140% of a maximum of 175 right back down to 35%. No, percent. So I could give you the number after this. It's in a spreadsheet. I can't give it to you right now, but it's significantly more. 75 million, give or take, easily.
Councillor Naylor.
And I assumed that with that drop of debt, then the cost of finance will drop quite dramatically too. And so I know we're not talking about the future, but that will help us in that rates capping in the long term. Right.
And the direct reflection on that is lower revenue as well.
Very, very good point. There's always turns and roundabouts. One thing I want to be really clear, and we are going to jump shortly to a long-term plan workshop. Yes, we will have more headroom. No, we do not need to spend the extra headroom, and there could be, to be fair, it is an important thing to say, and it might feel like it sounds that it goes without saying, but actually we do need to make sure we say it. It's not allowing us just to go spend, because then we will have more issues coming up. Councillor Wallace.
Yeah, along those lines, just a comment, yeah, because the cost to the ratepayers not going to change.
Councillor Naylor.
And so that 34% would be of the new revenue that we would be expecting? Right, okay. Not the existing.
And sorry, through you, Scott, as well, just to also point out at high level that the need for money for infrastructure spending will be lower as well, which is will be reflected in that lower headroom.
Thanks again very much, team. I just want to quickly check before we move on to our next bit. It was, I think, very good to make sure we're all up to speed. Do you have the direction you need to carry on with your next steps with the annual budget?
I'm hearing to run those 2 scenarios, bring the results, and governance will make a decision on whether they want to pull those levers as well. Is that correct?
Absolutely correct. Thank you. Thank you very much for that. I'm not sure if we need to have any kind of a break before we move into part 2, or are we happy just to kick straight in?
Yep.
Brilliant.
If I recommend so.
I'm more than happy. So now we move to part 2, which will be our long-term plan kick-off. Welcome to the table, Rebecca and Carter. Thank you very much. And I'm glad that you were a part of the conversations that we were just having for our annual budget. So now we're needing to move mindset slightly, and this shows, team, the importance of how much we're going to have to focus on our long-term plan. In effect, we're going to be working on both at the same time. And there is a huge amount of work within any kind of, or any long-term plan that any local authority puts together. I just want to make a couple of comments, and I'm not going to re-go over some of them that I just mentioned in the annual plan workshop that relate to the long-term plan. But one that I want to be really clear on, and I have been really clear on with officers, is I take my legal responsibility seriously to be leading the development of the long-term plan from a governance level. That doesn't mean doing all of the nuts and bolts, but making sure that we have that governance lens, and my lens, to be frank, over the process and over the development. We have Carter, who from an ELT perspective will be taking ownership of the project, and Rebecca Bell will be familiar to many of us. We've worked with her on another project, but also coming in to assist to make sure we get this right, because there is a lot to do to meet the expectations of our community and actually meet the expectations of the government. So I'd like to hand over to Carter and Rebecca.
Thank you, Mascot. Kia ora koutou, and thank you all for being here today. This is an important milestone as we start reshaping the long-term plan for the next 10 years. The LTP is more than just a statutory requirement. It's our strategic roadmap. It sets out how we deliver services, invest in infrastructure, and respond to the challenges and opportunities facing our district. Today's workshop is about starting the journey together. We'll start with an overview of the LTP process, and then we will look at the big picture. We'll look at the key timelines and success factors. This is going to be a collaborative session. We want your insights, questions, and perspectives as we set the foundation for the plan. By the end of today, you'll hopefully have a clear understanding of the process, the challenges ahead, and we'll work together to deliver a plan that reflects the community priorities. I will now hand over to Rebecca, who's the project manager for the LTP, and we will be working together on the deliverables of this key initiative. Thank you.
Thanks, Mayor Scott and Carter. Kia ora koutou, ko Rebecca Bell tōku ingoa. Lovely to be back, and nice to see some familiar faces, and congratulations to those of you who are new around the table. I'm sure we'll get to know each other well over the next year and a half. As I said, Rebecca Bell, I'm based in Palmerston North. I've been around local government a little bit. Over the last decade, I have worked for and with Manawatu District Council, Ruapehu District Council, Palmy City, and Horizons Regional and Tararua. So I feel like I'm kind of at home in the Manawatu, Wanganui, Tararua whānau of small councils. So it's lovely to be working with you for this LTP. As Carter said, we're going to break the session up into two key parts today. The first part is a general overall introduction to the long-term plan, and the second part will be specifically kicking off the long-term plan for 2027. The introduction to the long-term plan is sort of part of the induction process, so it will be new to those of you who are new around the table, and hopefully it will be a good refresher for those of you who are returning. So, how do we do the clicking thing? Okay, I'll just give you the thumbs up. Right, so next slide, please. I've got, I did have some animations in there, but we'll have to work our way through that. That's cool.
So, my first question was going to be, what is the long-term plan? In my animations, I didn't have all that other stuff there. Of course, you've already had a heads up. But anyway, let's. How about you tell us what you understand the long-term plan to be all about?
My understanding, and I'm happy to be corrected, is that this is the plan that allows us to consult with the community to make the decisions about where we're actually going. And it becomes a founding document for us to then create our annual plans from there. So we need to be considering where we're going, what the rates increases are, so we can inform the community. They can have the opportunity for consultation and provide feedback, but it's a legal requirement for us to do, and it just makes good sense to me to do anyway. So that's my thoughts.
Good answer. Anyone else?
Yeah, just I see it as our strategy to our districts, to the people, to build for the business. So basically it's what drives the business, where we can get our funding, where we can plan out what we're going to be doing, where our issues are and what things we need to be working on, and what the expectations are to the people as well.
Yeah, great. Good answer.
Possibly also it's a framework that also encapsulates our aspirations for how we see things in 30 years' time, or over that 30-year period. And inside that framework are the annual plans.
Yep, that's good. Yep, you bring up an interesting point around timing. So the long-term plan covers how many years? 10. Within that, we have the infrastructure strategy, which covers 30 years. So, yep, good point. Anyone else got anything to contribute? No. So let's go back to that slide. So I think you've probably covered off most of what was up there. So it's a 10-year strategic planning document that outlines council's activities, services, projects and finances. So it sets council's strategic direction. It identifies your community outcomes, what you want in the long term for your community. It guides investment in infrastructure and levels of service. It's about financial sustainability and transparency to the community. And accountability. We've talked about community outcomes. We will revisit all of these things in great detail, but we've talked about community outcomes, infrastructure strategy. There's also a financial strategy that needs to sit alongside that. We talked about where council gets its money and how it will spend its money. What levels of service it will commit to for the community, and how we will measure whether you are successful in delivering those services to the community. Budgets, of course, and financial forecasts, and then some descriptions of the activities that you undertake. Next slide. You've already identified that it's a legal requirement, and I'm sure it's no surprise that it's the Local Government Act that where the bulk of the direction for the LTP sits. And it's got the LGA, the Local Government Act, has quite a lot of direction, and within that, a lot of discretion for you around how you set up your LTP. Some of the processes are quite prescribed, and some of them are open. If you want some really interesting bedtime reading, you can go away and have a look at sections. It's actually Section 76 to 81 on the decision making, for a very good framework for decision making, and we'll come back to that shortly. There's the requirement to adopt the LTP every 3 years. It's a 10-year document, but you re-look at it every 3 years. Consultation requirements, and even the content requirements for the LTP. And of course, financial management, that is the best bedtime reading, so just heads up there. And of course, there's the Local Government Rating Act, which we need to comply with as well. So next slide. We've touched on, or you guys have touched on this actually already, some of the content for this slide in your conversation around the annual plan, but I'm gonna repeat it. So we've talked about the 10-year planning horizon for the LTP. So it's a rolling cycle, a rolling review cycle every 3 years with a refreshed 10-year horizon. What's the annual plan? Tell me what the annual plan is. Don't all speak at once.
No, so it's the budget for the year effectively. So it's the budget for the upcoming year.
So how does that relate to the long-term plan?
From my understanding, again, happy to be corrected, the annual plan has to reflect what was in the long-term plan from that year. So this year, our annual plan is based on year 3 of the previous long-term plan. Next year, we'll have the long-term plan, which will then come back to year 1 of that long-term plan. The following year will be year 2, then we'll move into the year 3. I don't know if I've got that right.
You're an expert. You could come up and do this. Far out, man. Especially for a newbie. I'm so impressed. Well done. Right. Well, it's all good. It's good. It's the best way to learn something is to explain it to others. So well done. Yes. So year 1 of the long-term plan, in the case of the long-term plan we're about to kick off, is from July 2027. From that point, that will be year 1 of the long-term plan. Then years 2 and 3 are kind of updates to those relevant years of the long-term plan. So we know that as soon as we create and agree on a plan of any description, what happens? Things change, right? So that is just something we can rely on. So instead of being firmly wedded to year 2 of the long-term plan, the annual plan is kind of a response to the changes that have happened since you adopted the long-term plan. So it's some councils call it an exceptions document. It's exceptions to that year of the long-term plan, right? Does that make sense? So it's not about setting a whole new budget, like Mayor Scott said before. It's about tweaking in response to things that you didn't know were going to crop up between now and when it was adopted. So which year of the long-term plan are we in currently? We're currently in year 2, and you're working on the annual plan for year 3, right? So, and this is where you are going to have to get used to the different hats that you have to wear particularly over the next 6 months. In previous LTPs that I've done, we've actually had different coloured hats for annual plan conversations and long-term plan conversations to try and, differentiate them. But it sounds like you guys are all over it and you know. But so at the moment, you are implementing year 2, and you're planning year 3, and you are also planning, you're about to kick off planning, year 4, which is year 1 of the new LTP, right? Who said local government was straightforward, eh? So, once in June, you'll adopt your year 3, and you'll be into year 3, and then all you have to worry about is implementing year 3 and planning the LTP. So, like I say, buckle in, because you've got a lot coming at you over the next few months. And then we have the annual report, which is... How much money is spent? Report on performance. Performance for...
No, for the previous financial year.
Yes. how much money has spent, how you have performed, how you've performed against what you said you were going to do in that year. So not just about money, but about performance levels of service, those kind of things as well, reflecting on the year that has recently finished. And that links directly back to what we say in the long-term plan and the annual plans. Okay, so an LTP amendment is quite rare. That is where you actually, any change that is required is more than just a tweak to that year of the annual plan, and it's actually kind of a big, new strategic decision is required. In that case, there's a section of the Act that covers off LTP amendments. It requires public consultation, it requires another audit. It's actually a big deal, and it doesn't happen very often because it's very costly. And if you can hold off on that decision until the LTP process that's going to come around eventually, that's the preferred approach.
Rebecca, sorry, just are you happy to take questions as we go through?
Yes, happy to take questions.
So I'll let you run any of that, but
Okay.
if you signal Rebecca you'd like a question.
Sure thing.
Thanks, Rebecca. Just curious to understand what catalyses a major LTP amendment? Why would you do that?
I guess this is Malcolm actually probably potentially has more experience in this than me. Have you ever done an amendment before?
I avoid them like the plague.
Yes.
Wouldn't Three Waters go?
Something like that, a big...
The issue around local water done well probably would have been in your LTP, as you would have been signalled, surely.
It was.
Yeah.
No, if you look at that.
Although there was probably an amendment that avoided the LTP amendment because of local water done well, probably without checking. Yeah.
They've timed it. Seems to me as though they've timed it to time with the change in long-term plan, because if it was a year earlier, we would have had to have done an amendment, I'm sure.
Leaving aside local water done well, which I do think, from as memory serves, had avoided the trigger for that specific reason. You'll note that almost all the other recently announced ones are sort of centre around the operative date for the next LTP. I don't think that's a mistake.
We did have, I know in our last LTP discussions, we thought that we likely would need to do an LTP amendment, and that was factored into our conversations. But as Malcolm said, it ended up not being required, but we thought it would, but highly undesirable.
Learning the technology, sorry. Yes, it is. It's something that, for some reason, for some unforeseeable reason, perhaps like a massive earthquake that just changes all the goalposts, it may be. I mean, you don't really want to be having to rethink about an LTP in the wake of an earthquake, do you? But things that create a significant change in your strategic direction or priorities. Any more questions on that slide? So even though it's quite easy, and we're often accused of having a whole bunch of documents that sit on the shelf and collect dust or hold our doors open, in fact, the LTP is something that is very much a living document, and you should be very familiar with your LTP, the one that you're currently operating under, and I will be routinely directing you back to relevant sections of the current LTP as you consider future thinking.
Just about that, where we're going with the waters and all that is coming. We know all that. So won't that trigger an amendment?
So I am not an expert on the water part of it, but what I do know is that we are working to integrate the timing of both parts of the process so that they work together. The deadlines for the water changes are not going to impact the progress of this LTP. Yeah. Okie dokie, next slide. So roles and responsibilities. So as with any strategic endeavour, there are layers of responsibility and roles in the execution of the endeavour. And the most obvious is the governance and the management role, and it's obviously no surprise to you that you guys sit in the governance space. And then there's the management side of things. So as Mayor Scott earlier mentioned, the LGA clearly sets the responsibility for the development or the leadership of the long-term plan with the Mayor. And it's the Mayor's responsibility to bring you guys along kicking and screaming with him through the process. Okay, that works. So as elected members, your job is to set that strategic direction and priorities. You will set and fund realistic levels of service. You will engage with the community, and you as elected representatives will provide the democratic oversight of the process. Management role is to run around like crazy in the background, doing the research, doing the analysis, doing options analysis, implications analysis, and bringing that back to you for your consideration and decision making. When it comes to consultation and the LTP, all the drafts and the working documents and all of that stuff, all of that is developed at the management level, and we coordinate the consultation process, engagement processes that you will deliver. In terms of the design of those processes, you will be involved in that. You will help design the engagement processes, and as always, the very competent staff will go away and make sure it happens the way you want it to. And then, of course, implementation is critical. Questions? Comments? Oh, okay, let's move on. This is another slide that I wish I could just have the header up and let you guys come up with the answers. But as we've talked through this stuff so far, what are your thoughts about your responsibility as governors and decision makers on behalf of the community? What are you thinking about here at the outset?
Just affordability really for people, making sure we try and keep everything under control and give something to the communities. It's a big thing, transparency in what we do and affordability.
Yeah. Anything else? Yep. Councillor Johns?
I guess the difficulty is we don't know what's ahead of us in the next, over the next 12 months. The whole world could shift. We mightn't even be a council in 3 years' time. But no, but I don't think we've ever done a long-term plan with so much doubt as to what the future holds. I guess that's what I'm saying.
Yeah, we'll have an opportunity to revisit that a little bit later. Yeah.
To me, I think that it presents an opportunity for us to think creatively. Chris and I were just talking at lunchtime about how we need to, do a total rethink, for instance, of how we manage potholes. And we were coming up with all sorts of crazy ideas, which I'm sure Hamish would turn in his grave when we start bringing them forward. But I look forward to it as an opportunity for us to explore how we can be smarter. And in a meeting yesterday, I said I'd like to think that Tararua District Council could be the first council in the country to reduce rates, and everyone laughed in the room at me, quite understandably. But if we had that as a goal, even if we got to 0 rates in year 7 of the long-term plan, I think that would be a worthy aspiration. So Yeah, so I would be, dead keen to see this as an opportunity and just go beyond. And I think, to Peter's point, we don't know what's going to happen in, the next 12 months, let alone 36 months, let alone 5 years, let alone 10 years. But we should be looking forward to it with a sense of optimism and that there will be smart things that will allow us to help reduce our costs or deliver better services cheaper or whatever. So, yeah, I'm optimistic and excited.
Oh, it's so great that somebody else is excited about this as me.
Great. I think we're all very excited, actually. I did just want to comment on that, though, and this is where unexpected potential legislative constraints may have an impact even on some of our greatest excitements. And part of and I did chuckle along when you suggested that, Councillor Naylor, but maybe not for the reason that you thought. The proposed rates capping or rates banding would actually make that not possible. So the banding of between, depending on economic conditions, of between 2 and 4% that we may be faced with, regardless, would require council on that proposal to put up rates by 2%. That would so it's not that it actually, government is telling us that is undesirable to look at. So unexpected legislative things will jump out at us right throughout this process. That's one example of it. But there's going to be a whole lot of things that will sit around this table saying, let's do this. I'd love to do this. Here's a solution. And it can be, and it's great that Rebecca stays excited about the long-term plan, because part of her job will be saying, that's lovely, and you're not allowed to legally do it. So how do we find another way? So prepare yourself for that as we immerse ourselves in the process.
Thank you. For me, it's just about understanding the levels of service and the loss of some of that due to the systems improvement bill. And I think that goes back to my question earlier about all the things that we will have to change.
Yes, and that conversation will start from as early as the conversations start next year. So, we'll step through that in a really logical way. So, yep.
Thanks, Rebecca. It goes a little bit to what Councillor Naylor was talking about, the realisation that, as Malcolm has been telling us, the rates capping model will be based on GDP. So if GDP changes one particular year in our LTP that we hadn't factored in, I guess what I'm seeing then is perhaps a less is more type approach to an LTP. And the LTPs I've been involved with have had pages and pages of detail, and yet if one of the major guiding legislative requirements we're going to have when rates capping comes in says, well, you might have planned for 4%, but you've got to do it at 2%. There must be some iterative mechanism included within our LTP process from then on, wouldn't there, to allow that bit of nimbleness? Because we won't be able to say it's going to be 2%, it's going to be 4%. That's going to be a model that's taken out of our hands.
Yeah, so that's kind of where the forecasting assumptions fit in. So at the beginning of the year, there's a set of assumptions every year, every LTP, that is these are the things that we're going to agree on from a planning point of view, so that we're all speaking the same language as we build the details. So those assumptions will have to be iterated throughout the process, and particularly in this case, with the level of uncertainty and even the timing of when things will become more certain, we don't know. So we will come to you with an early set of assumptions, and then as things start to change, we'll have to iterate as we go along. And at some point, and we'll come to this a little bit later, at some point you need to draw a line in the sand, because you just can't keep working with shifting sands. But we have to stay an acknowledgement of the level of uncertainty that we're working with. We have to stay agile all the way through the project. And that might require a little bit of rework or tweaking or whatever, but that's actually beyond our control in a situation like this. Yeah. Any other questions or comments? So just coming back to the slide then, you know, as the decision makers, you've got some very some balls to keep in the air as we go through this process. You're thinking about short and long-term needs. You're thinking about affordability and funding. Obviously, climate is an ever-present topic of conversation that we need to consider. Working with all of the stakeholders, with iwi, with partners, with the community, obviously the transparency and defensibility of your decisions, and we need to be trying to stay abreast of the implications of the changes in reform. And of course, next year's an election year, so there's another whole change that we will face at a point at which we're actually quite far through the process, actually. But anyway, that's okay. We'll cross that bridge when we come to it. So let's go to the next slide. Decision making and the LGA. I alluded to this earlier, and I mentioned that the LGA has quite a good framework for decision making for you guys. And I even though I joked before about it being bedtime reading, it is actually really useful. If you go to the LGA, to the horse's mouth, and read these sections, it does actually give you a lot of clear direction and a good way to think about decision making. It covers things. Take my glasses off. It covers things like requirements in relation to decisions, community views in relation to decisions, compliance with procedures in relation to decisions, identification of inconsistent decisions, and contribution to decision-making process by Māori. So quite practical, and the language isn't too highfalutin and too difficult to get your head around. Also, a key part of the decision-making framework is your significance engagement policy. For those of you who have been sitting around the table for a few years, what is the significance and engagement policy? Does more than that? Did I have it off? Sorry.
Well, my understanding is that if there are minor tweaks in an annual plan that weren't in the long-term plan, we don't have to consult. But if they are deemed significant, we do.
That's right. So it's the guidance or the set of criteria by which, as a council, you determine an issue to be significant, or to the degree of the significance of a decision or an issue that you're thinking about. And you then, on the basis of that, the level of significance, you then determine what is an appropriate level of engagement. So that policy is actually under review at the moment, and it will be brought back to you early in the year, with the intention that any decisions that you're making in relation to this long-term plan are made under the most recent policy. So we don't want to be making some decisions under the last policy and some under the new policy. So we'll try to work that into the process. So you will all be very familiar with the significance and engagement policy very soon. So some principles or some duties, I guess, when making decisions under the LGA is to be proportionate. We don't need to blow out the analysis on a decision that's pretty minor. We need to consider reasonable options, and one of the options is the status quo. We need to identify assumptions, uncertainties, gaps, strategic alignment, community views. There's all sorts of things that go into good decision making. The impacts, cost, benefit, who's affected, engaging to the degree that it is proportionate to the issue. Just on the note of consultation for the long-term plan, that is a process that is fairly prescribed. So you're required to consult for the long-term plan. And we need to keep good processes and documentation, because what happens towards the end of the process where good documentation and records and process are really come into their own? Anybody know? The audit. If we can just, if we have got, if we have had thorough, consistent and robust processes and documentation, we will do fine in audit. If we haven't, it can be a nightmare. So good decision making. There's no perfect decision. It's about clear, lawful and well-reasoned path from the problem to the decision, with good supporting documentation along the way. So you are in the process of making decisions, you're balancing the evidence, community views and long-term outcomes to achieve something that you can live with and are committed to. But that is probably not perfect. Next slide. Questions or comments?
Just before we do that, I'm just feeling the vibe of the room. So if it's okay with you, we might just take a 10-minute break. Get some. Oh, is that the last one? Okay.
Oh, sorry. Does that keep turning off? Am I?
It's just the camera follows.
So the LTP is legally required. It's community driven, or at least very you're very engaged with the community and community views through the process. It relies on good planning, robust processes, documentation, strategic alignment, legislative compliance, all of those good things. It's a complex project, and we will be having sort of iterative conversations as we go through. And community engagement, critical. We are collaborating with the community when we go through this process, and everyone has a role, elected members, staff, and the community. So let's have a cup of tea or do some star jumps or something. Oh, sorry, I missed you.
I just wanted to ask about the reliable data. Could you define that? Is that information gathered internally from staff, or is it members of the public who contribute to that? Thanks.
I guess there's a variety of sources. In some cases, we commission data. That's, for example, population growth and demographic data. We bring that in from the experts. There's just a ton of data and info in-house that we can rely on, or from that has been sourced. If there is data out in the community that is worth considering, then they are welcome to bring it into the conversation.
Just on that. Also, what you're saying, Rebecca, one of the challenges, though, that some of us might have experienced around the table is that as you engage with the community, they might not have all the facts that you have. And especially if it's an emotive topic, it can be quite challenging as you go through the process, that the community might have one view, but actually if they knew the reality of the costs or some of the other factors behind it, which we're unable to share with them, sometimes they don't always align and can be a challenging situation.
Yeah, that's true. And I think one of the big challenges that I've sort of wrestled with through all of my time in local government, where I have been doing LTPs and policies and strategic planning of all sorts, shapes and sizes, is community messaging. And as I said, you guys will have an input into the design of that, but it can be a real challenge giving the community all the information they need without swamping them with all the complex detail. But if we don't give them all the complex detail, and the ones who want that detail then accuse us of not giving all the detail, so it's a bit of a balancing act, and we just have to find our way through. We need to give the community the information they need, not more than necessary that just confuses the issue even more, but everything that they need to be really well informed on the things that we are seeking feedback from them on. Okie dokie, let's take a break and we'll be back. part 2 of the workshop this afternoon, where we are going to spend some time focusing specifically on the long-term plan 2027 to 37. And yeah, the purpose of today is to lay the groundwork for a successful long-term plan. So we're going to take a high-level view of project phases and timing, and areas of focus for this project. We're going to do a bit of thinking around project risks and opportunities, and we've already done a little bit of that so far, so we'll continue that conversation. Think about it from your point of view as an elected member. What does project success look like and LTP success? And then, of course, an opportunity for more questions and comments. So, next slide. I'm going to talk a bit about the development process of the LTP. This will probably, you will probably want to refer back to this slide at a later date. I'm going to kind of throw a lot of information at you, but as we go through the next few months, it'll all kind of step through in a logical fashion. So the LTP takes about 18 months to put together from sort of starting now. And if you could click, please. So the required time to adopt the LTP is by the 30th of June 2027, and then there's a few wrap-up things that have to happen after that. So that takes us through to about 18 months. Next click, please. So there's 4 phases for the development of the LTP, and they're sort of overlapping. I think I said before it's quite an iterative process, and you will find that as we go through the LTP, we open up a whole bunch of cans, and then we have to kind of leave them all open and waiting until they all come together at the end. So there is some overlapping and some iteration that happens throughout. So we're in the first phase, preparation phase at the moment, which will take us through to early next year. And then basically all of next year is the planning and review phase, which is where the real mahi kicks in, and you are going to be opening up all those cans and digging around in there. Consultation is the focus of early 2027, but that work actually starts in the latter part of next year as we compose a consultation document and all the bits and pieces that go along with that. And then, of course, after consultation, there's the adoption of the project and the close. So some of the ingredients that go into each of those phases, you can click again, please. So obviously with any project there's a lot of background work that goes in before we start doing things like kick-off meetings and things like that, documentation, planning, scheduling, templates, things like that. Then the kick-off. So last week we had a kick-off with the staff, sort of a similar conversation to what we're having today. Mayor Scott was there for that. Do you have any reflections on that while we're mentioning it?
Just a very quick similar-ish type setting, but I think what it does is it opens up our eyes to how much work will be going into this from an officer level, and how many people are involved within it. But no, I thought it was a good, productive kick-off meeting.
Early next year, we will be going into the scene setting and strategic direction setting. So I'm sure you're aware that Mayor Scott has a hui planned for January for you guys to be talking strategy. In preparation for that, we will be spending the next few weeks preparing some material, an environmental scan, a strategic stock take, and a financial health check, so that you've kind of got a single package of information that will feed into your thinking. What's going on in the world around us? What are some trends? What can we expect in the district coming up? What sort of big picture financial thinking and conversations you'll be having? So we're preparing that in time for your hui at the end of January. Once that has taken place and we've got the strategic direction from you. We then, like I say, kick into a lot of the detailed mahi that is required by the Local Government Act. I won't go through each of those, but you can see them there. And then the third phase, consultation, we have to prepare a consultation document, and there's, again, quite a lot of process that goes into that. Then the consultation document has to be audited. By audit, we bring in Audit New Zealand, team from Audit New Zealand, and the supporting information that feeds into the development of the consultation document, which is essentially all the things you're going to be working on next year is the supporting information. So all of that stuff gets wrapped up at the beginning of 2027 to be audited. Then we go out for consultation. Then we do the follow-up after consultation. Any decisions you make as a result of the consultation gets brought through into the long-term plan material. It all gets audited again before adoption. And then after adoption, we'll do a project debrief where we capture the lessons learned. So, questions?
So on the consultation side, which is something I'm pretty passionate about, is, historically what it's looked to me like consultation has been targeted around, here's what we think we're going to do for you, and you can provide a bit of feedback on that. We don't actually seem to consult much with the community about their thoughts. They can provide thoughts on our recommendations, but we can't get information from them. And I'm wondering whether we're missing a step somewhere. I don't know how yet, but I'd really like to see how we can consult earlier without doing the formal consultation. So perhaps we call it something else other than consultation.
Yeah, so under the planning and review, you'll see there's early engagement. Yeah. So, and when I said before around you guys will be designing and inputting into what that looks like, that involves the methods of engagement, but also the topics of conversation, right? So what is it that you want to be talking to your community about early? What sort of, what is it that, there might be issues that you guys have identified that you specifically want to ask the community about, but it's also an opportunity to say to the community, what do you want to be talking to us about? And what do you want us to be thinking about? Scott?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. I just want to add a tiny bit into this. I absolutely agree with you, Councillor Naylor. And actually at the officer level kick-off meeting, we did have some early discussions about this, and I know that I've had quite a few conversations with Carter and some with Rebecca about effective pre-consultation, so actually having effective conversations with the community before we even get to finalising things, and then really consultation should be for those that have meaningfully engaged in that process. They should actually see the things that they've talked about reflected in the final document, and for me that would be a real successful outcome, that someone that took the time to really engage in pre-consultation looked at that and then actually saw some of that reflected in the final document. So entirely agree and absolutely should be a priority for us.
Just a note on terminology, sorry. What Mayor Scott is referring to as pre-consultation, I'm meaning early engagement. So it's all the same thing. Yeah. Yes,
I'm just going to change my committee from consultation communication. I'm going to add engagement onto it as well, I reckon, with the mayor's permission, of course. Exactly.
Yeah, go ahead.
I'll just make a comment. On Peter's comment, he's quite right. But one of the things we should be doing is going to our community boards and community committees and saying, what do you want? And give them some bit of a structure to that. And iwi, the same. So that they can come back to us. And then if later on they've got nothing to grizzle about because we've listened to them, even if we don't do anything.
Councillor Amboy?
I guess adding to Councillor Johns' comment. Has council in previous consultations, have they reached out to various community groups or boards out there? I'm just curious. Thanks.
I will attempt to answer this. I only know from the time that I've been on council. Yes, but not as effectively as we could have, would probably be the best way of putting it. All community boards and community committees are asked and reminded about their responsibility to do a formal submission. But these are people that are close to the action, as Peter Johns likes to refer it, people that are close to the action and obviously know the best way to solve problems. I think that we absolutely should be utilising that more. During our full council meeting today, we had the community board terms of reference, and I indicated then that there will be some further discussions, not just for community boards, but I'd also like to see for community committees a little bit more rigour around how we're getting information back from them. So I endorse the comments Councillor Johns has made, and hopefully that answers that question a little bit.
Yeah, this is good because but then we have to feed the community boards into the council and then not get this tokenism, because what happens with the last lot of consultations of different, and they've all been mentioned in the room but not by subject, but if we go out there, some of the people, and we tried, and you lose count of how many forms of communication we've got now. But we seem to lack, and it's not through not trying, but it's that old adage, you can please some of the people some of the time, but you know what I mean? And so I'm ticking a box for the council here. We do try, and we're open-minded. We're certainly, it's like your parachute. If your mind's not open, and your parachute doesn't open, you're not in a good space.
Like everyone's sort of talking to and saying a lot around the communication is trying to get to them. I think it's going to come down a lot to us as councillors to get out and find ways to get out to the groups and present to them, and not in necessarily a formal manner, but an open manner for them to talk to things. And I think we're going to have to get out to the different groups and actually really drive that forward to make a change, because council's been doing a lot in their frameworks to notify people through Facebook, through all the other means that, documents that go out. But I think there's more that can be done, and I think it's going to be getting on the ground and doing it. And we've been elected into this role to do exactly that. And I think we need to be the drivers for this as well. And we need to work really hard to actually going to all the groups, sports groups, any kind of group that you can, because they feed different people, different demographics, and completely, in that area.
I might just jump to the next slide, but in continuity with this conversation. This is what I call the bird's eye view. And I'm sure you've all studied it in detail in the last few days. And I probably don't need to talk you through all the individual elements of it. But the purpose of this is that it's essentially the LTP on a page. You'll see the top line across the top, there's the 4 phases, and kind of roughly broken up in the kind of the months that generally fit within those phases. And the horizontal lines are the kind of the main work streams of the LTP. So the top one is scene setting, then the green one is assets and activities, policy, financial, consultation, audit, and document development. I'll talk about the white line in a moment. But when it's up on the big screen like that, it's obviously difficult to see the writing, but you will have it in front of you so that you can expand it as you need to. But this is a way of just keeping track of where we are in the process, and for you to kind of see how each conversation that we're having fits into the bigger whole. So the red dotted line indicates where we are at the moment. The little red circle around the bubble says this is the conversation we're having today. So that bubble says project kickoff. So that's where we are today. And you'll see that in early next year, we're going into strategy setting, forecasting assumptions, activity group structure reviews. You can see that the significance and engagement policy is underway. It's got a patterned colour there, it's underway. And as we complete each of these bubbles of work, we'll fill in the colours so that you can see where we are in progress-wise. The two that are highlighted, are bright yellow, are just to indicate that there's a high level of uncertainty and we need to figure out where that fits in the process. And you'll see that the bottom one there is early engagement with timing and a question mark. So once you've had your strategy hui with the Mayor, and once you guys have set your strategic direction, you then have the basis for the conversations that you want to have with your community, right? So basically, once you've got that drafted up, you are then in a position to start planning your engagement and your conversations with the community. So once we're a little bit clearer on timing, I'll tweak that early engagement bubble to the most appropriate place. And early in the new year, once you've had your hui, the comms team, who I know have tuned into the live stream of this and will be listening to what you're saying very carefully, will work with you to design your engagement and comms for the project. So you could be giving some thought to that over the summer, how you want to do that. But I know that they will be bringing their best ideas, and combined with you guys, I think from the sounds of it, you'll be able to create a really powerful engagement process for this LTP, and it's another thing to be excited about. Back to so that was just a little, I was sort of tying that back into the previous conversation. So back to the bird's eye view, you'll see along to January 2027, there's a dotted line there, which is kind of the end of December. It's kind of this time next year, we need to have everything ready to go for audit, because audit will come in the beginning, like in the February of the following year. So we need to have things ticked off and ready to go. And the black line is audit is here, and if we haven't got stuff done by then, we're in trouble. The second black line is adoption of consultation material, that's post-audit. So that's essentially kind of how you navigate your way around that bird's eye view, and we will use this for every workshop. We will come with an updated version so that you can see where the workshop discussions are happening in the context of the LTP. The white strip across the bottom says non-LTP mahi, and that is really just a way of signalling the other big chunky pieces of work that are going on at council that are not LTP, that the staff are also managing, so that you can just see, you know, all the different balls that are being juggled, and that is very much in draft. I've plonked things in there that I am aware of, but I know there's a lot that I have not yet had a chance to talk to the team about. That will happen tomorrow. So the next version, or version 1, actually this is draft, version 1 that you see of this will have a little bit more detail around that. But I just wanted to give you a heads up. You'll see that you will become very familiar with this, and it will be in every workshop. Questions? No? Good. Must be clear as. Next slide, please. This is really just repetition of what we've talked about before, and I don't think I need to say much about that, so let's keep moving. Lessons learned. So, as I mentioned, at the end of the LTP, we will do a formal debrief. I will come back to you as elected members, to the project team, to the exec team, and capture the things that your reflections on the process and what you've learned along the way, so that can be used to improve the next project. So that was done at the end of the last LTP, and I've read through the notes from that, and that has informed some of the planning all of the planning that I have done so far for this LTP. So there was a staff debrief. There's also a set of recommendations that has come from the Audit and Risk Chair. and audit, once they have been through the full process, give us a management report that says, here's where some improvements could have been made or whatever. So that is really critical to start a new LTP with all that feedback so that we can factor those learnings in. And I've also had some pretty key conversations with key project staff, just with the benefit of the passing of time. How did it work? What do you want us to keep in mind for this time? So that's how we've used the lessons learned from the last project, and that will be repeated at the next project. So if you go to the next slide, please. Some of the focus areas, some of the things that we've learned that we need to think about this time is we need to be a little bit more thorough in our risk assessment and management processes, both in terms of thinking about the LTP, thinking about the strategic and corporate risks, as well as project risks. So we've already got that underway. We need to improve our communication between all the layers of the organisation and in all directions about all the aspects of the project. So we will focus on not just external comms and engagement, but internal comms. Clear project roles and responsibilities, again, the governance management thing, but also within the team and within the wider team of people, what we need, by when, that kind of thing. Tightening up on workshops with a clear purpose. I've set up a template for the workshops for staff to use, where there's a very thorough sort of set of information that they need to present to you with a clear purpose and outcome. So you should be fairly well informed, and we should be very well informed about your thoughts by the end of workshops this time around. Infrastructure and financial strategy, a little bit more time and focus on those. Another key learning from last time was that the conversation around performance and levels of service and the budget need to be happening at the same time. They were a little bit not as integrated as well as they could have been last time. And overall, lifting the competency of the organisation in terms of the LTP, just lifting I think we've got quite a lot of new staff. And a few new people to local government. So understandably, we need to kind of bring everybody up to speed on the process. Also, we've talked about community engagement. I think everybody's on the same page there, doing a really great job of that. And we're also going to have to keep our finger on the pulse of central government requirements. Further comments or questions around that?
Yeah, just a couple there. Within the project and what you're doing, there's obviously some silos of information coming through from the different groups and feeding into that. Are you holding that as a centralised system and bringing all the information together into a portal that you manage and maintain and sort of that way, or is it through the council's internal controls here?
One of the key ways that we will improve integration this time, avoid silos, let's say, is that our project team is made up of people from all across the organisation, from all the different departments within the organisation. We meet regularly. There is quite a strong overlap between the staff, the third tier staff who are the primary contributors, and then the exec team, and lots of QA processes that kind of feed up and down through those systems. We've obviously got ways of managing and storing and accessing all the relevant documentation. You will get so much information and so many documents and spreadsheets and stuff coming your way. So we have to do a really good job of managing that. So.
Just second to that, if the system is able to, is it possible to have a dashboard built out on current, how it's progressing, bit of detail about what is being worked on, and key items that need to be worked on from people's perspective, so from our side, so we can log in and see something rather than be emailed everything all the time, because being active on a system is often better than just being emailed stuff off a system.
Yep. Well, do you want to answer? Sure.
Thank you. So you used the Big Tin Can, for example, as a tool. So the intention was to publish the schedule so you can see where we're at. So pretty much the Gantt chart for the LTP, as well as any material that we share with you or that we that's important for you to be across. So we can use the Big Tin Can to do that, yeah, that's the only tool that you have access to so far, and we will make sure that it's up to date. When you've got the bird's eye view as well, that gives you a really good indication of where we're at, if there are any other ways that you'd like to have a look, or any other details that you'd like to have a look at in terms of the LTP documentation, we'll be more than happy to share.
Quickly jump in, and just on that point, it'd be good not to let's keep it simple so we know where we should be accessing the information, so if that's a consideration. Rebecca, I just wanted to quickly jump in. We have this meeting scheduled to 3:30, and I know that we have another part that will need it sort of at least 10 minutes to cover, so I just wanted to flag that.
There's the bird's eye view, and then there's I'll mention one more thing coming up for it's sort of the two main orientation pieces that you will need to use to keep yourself in the loop. Okay, I think we can move on. Oh, actually, did you want to say something, Malcolm?
Risks and opportunities, yes.
Oh, after this slide. Okay. Okay, so I really just wanted to give you guys an opportunity to voice your thinking around the risks and opportunities. Like I said, we've had a few of those come through already. Councillor Naylor mentioned the opportunity for a total rethink of, back to basics of thinking creatively about things. Opportunities around really good, fantastic engagement. Thinking about the risks of uncertainty, community levels of community engagement. Are there any other things that you see, or that you've kind of got thinking going on in your mind as we talk, that you'd like to raise here?
Yeah, thanks, Rebecca. And it sort of does cover some of these things that you were talking about, but packaging them up somewhat. There is both a real risk and a real opportunity when it comes to our reputation as a council. If we get this right, if we get our consultation right, if we get the end outcomes right, and if we deal well with the hurdles that are going to be thrown at us as we go along, potentially this could be the most difficult LTP ever, then we have a real opportunity to enhance our reputation as a council. On the flip side, we have a real risk of damaging our reputation, and I think that we should be having that in the front of our mind as we work through the process.
On a different tack, Scott, we've just discussed this. One of the risks in the whole thing is with the CCO, water CCO being developed, we'll to a large extent lose the control of our own destiny, and what plans we might have, e.g. growth plans, we may not be able to accomplish simply because we won't have water, e.g.
I think that is a fair risk that we need to consider as we work through, and I have every confidence in the chair of the District Growth Committee to help make sure that that stays front of mind.
Thanks, Rebecca. Is there any possibility or opportunity for the council to invest in any external fund revenues, like a business would?
Sorry, I should just say, because I just made a comment there and it was slightly facetious and it wasn't on mic where I said no. That's not to say that I'm naturally opposed to that. The reason why I said that more was where I believe the limitations of the Systems Improvement Bill will put us. I think things like that will be potentially a really tough ask. They also aren't without huge risk, and we know that even that in the last term where we came up with a creative investment that council made that became publicly undesirable. So we have to be really careful about how that's perceived in the community.
I think one of the big risks that needs to be just clearly put out there again is just the rates capping thing, that if that hits and when it hits and what it'll be and how we can look at that in the LTP. Because looking at it still looks as 12% for the following term. If that's correct, then that can't be that, so that's another big risk and cost.
Move on to the next slide then, and think about success factors. What, from your point of view, whether you're old or new, what might yes, of course, that's what I mean. Yeah. What might LTP success look like? That might be in terms of the project itself. That might be in terms of the community. It might be short-term, long-term, whatever it is for you. What might success look? It'd be good to hear from some of you who we haven't heard from today. And it's good to hear from some of you that we have heard from.
Just basically, again, it comes down to the communication and the people and making sure that they're happy with sort of the decisions that they've made along with us and stuff. So, you know, they're on the same steps and on the same path. Really, it's communication is a big one.
And this is similar but slightly different to Chris's comment there. For me, it's about us all at the end of this process being able to put our hand on our heart and say we did the best that we could for our community with what we had, knowing that some in the community may not love it, but the goal is that they at least understand our decisions and the reasons why we've made them, that it reflects the will of the community, and that we know that we have got the best outcomes possible within the constraints that we have, and we've communicated those well. A huge success factor for me, though, is that our community can feel like they were a part of the process and the decision making. So.
Yeah, I'd like to see if there's some way we could make that measurable, so that we've had we've got communication, we've got community engagement reports, from various other consultations that we've had, I believe. And so, if we can double that, triple that, quadruple that, whatever, because it's a pretty low bar to start with, then thinking about how we could measure that would be great. And then if someone does come to us later on and say, well, this is where the trend we're going to, next one, we aim to go higher, that would be great still. You're going to be busy. I am. The Performance and Monitoring Committee.
I think if we end up in the process with a document that provides and is seen by the community as providing confidence for the future, we'll have succeeded.
Sorry. I think it's been answered, but just also accountability for us and staff, and just as what Councillor John said, is just so the community has confidence in us. Thanks.
Rebecca, this will be my third go, I think, at an LTP. And for me, success this time will look like an approach of less is more, a real focus on what we should be doing, and an awareness and understanding of making sure we don't overcommit.
One more. I think an excellent audit management report would be a worthy goal to have as well. So that, when audit's done the job, we did it with our annual report this year. We came back all ticks. I think it was the first time ever. It'd be lovely to do that with our long-term plan as well.
What about help me team, strategic integration? So we've got all these, because we had that, I think of that workshop we had, about the 80-20. We were focusing on the 20 and really we need to focus on the strategy. So yeah, strategic, that's another word. Yeah. And I haven't even had a drink, so there you go.
Great. There's some really, really excellent things to aim for, and I'm going to make a note of those. I will save them somewhere where you guys can always refer back to them, and at the end of the project we will come back to those things and you can see how we did. Right. Just a couple of things to wrap up. Next slide, please. Couple of nuts and bolts. We've talked about the big tin can where all the material will be loaded and accessible for you. As I mentioned before, the long-term plan 2024 is your reference point for this project. You should have it saved wherever you need to save it so that it's quick access for you. As I said, I will be routinely pointing you to the relevant part of it that you need to be familiar with as we go along the way. It is your Bible. Workshops, that's the other orientation piece. So there's a sort of a dedicated workshop schedule that sits within the project schedule, and we will load the iterations of that to the big tin can so that you can see what's coming up and what the purpose of those workshops are, and that will be aligned with the bird's eye view so you can kind of see the trajectory of the conversation throughout the project.
Rebecca, could I just request if we had that schedule available and dates that is put into elected members' calendars as soon as humanly possible. We just do have elected members that are juggling work commitments, so I just want to make sure we have maximum notice.
Yeah, just a caveat that often you need to, we get the dates down but hold them kind of lightly as we go because things are always shifting. But totally, that's cool. Next slide, please. Last slide, next steps. So as I've already said several times, you've got your hui coming up at the end of January, and then we'll start on LTP workshops in February. So as I said before, buckle in, it's going to be a ride. The project team is working on that background material for you as we speak, and then we're also starting to gear up for those workshops and trying to nail down the project schedule. So there's a lot of work that has already been going on in the background for the last few weeks already, and I'm really looking forward to February next year. Thank you, everyone. Have a lovely break, and we'll see you next year.
Thank you very much, Rebecca. Thanks, Carter, as well. A really good kick-off to our long-term plan, which we're going to become more and more familiar with. I'd like to now just pass over to Malcolm to give us a bit of an update on reforms and the like.
And we've sort of danced around it. The various reform proposals that are floating around, of which there are many. And so what I've tried to do on one PowerPoint slide is sort of put it into some context and talk to it as a work in progress, because things are moving around in terms of consultation process. But if you bring that up, please, Simone. Oh, okay. Yeah, yeah. Let's just start with that. So there's us, TDC, in the middle. It's coloured red. Everything you'll see red is potentially covered by rate capping, okay? Rate capping is currently a proposal. It is undergoing what is known as targeted consultation. That doesn't stop anyone putting a point of view in, I might observe, but it currently is doing targeted consultation, primarily at LGNZ and Tararua as the two entities, and that is to conclude on the 4th of February, with probably legislation in place mid-year, at least prior to the election, okay? Now, the key point of this is that it is not a hard cap, it is a band, okay? It's modelled on the Reserve Bank proposal where, Reserve Bank's given a band that it's got to try to hold within. And certainly one of the ideas behind it is while there are ability to get exemptions from a regulator yet to be nominated, I guess the Commerce Commission probably, it might be someone else. The idea was also that if you go outside the band for a particular reason, it's all transparent and community pressure, and that will get you back with it. You've got to have a plan to get within the band. The band is primarily, there's actually a formula which I won't bore you with, but essentially it's around GDP and CPI. There's a different one for OPEX, a different one for CAPEX. The key point being is it could move around over time. Okay, the initial number that's been talked about is 2 to 4, but that could change. For example, we've had pretty anemic GDP growth, which has been around 2%, not 4%. Okay. On the other hand, if we become a tiger economy, it could be 7%. So that's the point. There's a band. The idea being that investment from our councils primarily and particularly in infrastructure would move with to accommodate growth. So that's the first thing. So the first one of these things, next click, is local waters. Okay, that is now an execution phase. The WISCO will be up and operational because we're legally required to make that so now on the 1st of July 27. It is not going to be subject to rates capping. That'll be water pricing determined by the WISCO itself. But for TDC, it is still a pretty significant event because 25-30% of our business essentially leaves TDC as day-to-day operator and moves to the WISCO, and we assume a shareholder role in that organisation. If nothing else was happening, that alone would drive a rethink about how we operate and structure ourselves. But it is not alone. Next one. I don't know why that's so blurry. I'm buggered if I know. We've got this, the system, what is known as the Local Government Systems Improvement Bill. That is out of select committee and awaiting second reading. I had thought it was going to be done before Christmas, but it's currently, as of today, sitting at number 45 on the order paper. So I'm guessing not. It has gone. It was 49 yesterday, so there's been some improvement. Yeah, it could shuffle. But so I've put a provisional date. Will probably been in place around about the start of the second quarter. And what it has a number of things in it, but one of the things for us to note, particularly in the context of the long-term plan, is scope of activity is constrained to 3 things: infrastructure, public services, and regulatory functions. I know what 1 and 3 are. Middle one will be a matter of what is that? There is no definition of public services in the bill. Could be, because it hasn't gone through what is known as committee of the whole yet, but it could be that. And that is not an accident. That is designed to constrain council activity. and that'll be a matter of law, and therefore will impact on LTP considerations going forward. As I say, probably I'm guessing April, given it's number 45 on the order paper. Next point. Then we have this thing called Simplify Local Government. That is a set of proposals which is open to consultation to the 20th of February. It would be my recommendation to Council that we put in a submission on that. It does a number of things, and I would imagine legislation, in order to meet the timelines that go to a later point, basically RMA thing, I would expect legislation sort of mid-part of this year in order to be effective and create what is known as this CTB, this Territorials Board, which is intended to be primarily populated by the mayors of each TA within the region. Our region being Manawatu-Whanganui. This is why it is the elimination of regional councillors, but not regionality. Okay, there may be Crown representation on that. It's part of the issues around the consultation. Plus, there's also issues around voting in that because both population-based. So in our region, I understand Palmerston North is one council, but it occupies about 40% of the population. But there are 7 or 8 TAs. I can't remember. So how the voting work is one of those other things. Once that's in place, is to do a number of things, but the big one is what I call create next click. An efficiency plan. It's actually called a regional reorganisational plan. That's a fancy word for efficiency plan, okay? And this is what Simplify Local Government is actually really about. And that's not just interpretation. I listened to an interview from Minister Bishop the other day, and he made that point quite explicitly. The obligation on this combined group, Combined Territories Board, is to prepare one of these regional reorganisation plans to find efficiency and lead to better governance of the region, which is an interesting question for Tararua because our waters, for example, is not with Manawatu-Whanganui region, it's with the Wairarapa councils who are part of the Greater Wellington region. Similarly, we are actually at one level the lower Hawke's Bay, which is the Hawke's Bay region. So one of the interesting points and we are named in the Simplify Local Government consultation, is we are one of those councils with overlapping regional things and, in my view, choices. So that'll be an interesting aspect to work through. I think you have a couple of years to do that, and then that plan goes, next click, to the Minister of Local Government for approval. In other words, not referendum. Okay, and if you want to do a reorganisation, which is another word for amalgamation proposals, you are required under the current legislation to have referenda in each of the affected regions by a proposal, which is one of the reasons some would argue that they haven't gone forward. Others would argue that's because people made a choice, but it depends on your point of view, I guess. But here, that is cut through, and the Minister of the day, whomever that is, currently Minister Simon Watts, would approve or not approve the plan. That probably looks a lot like the water process, where the WSDPs were approved. If it's Minister Watts, he approves the plan, and then I would expect you to implement the plan in the same way you are legally required to implement the water plan. And you know, let's call it a year or so down the track. What does that mean? Next click. It seems to me there are a number of things on the table. By the way, these are all part of under rates capping if they're read. It could lead to amalgamation, and that has certainly been widely talked about. And some regions are quite keen on that, others not so keen. It's a choice. They're not, to be very clear, compelling it. Okay, that is but they do expect improvements in governance and efficiencies. Other choices are shared services, and our Mayor's very clear about his perspective on that. But again, that would be covered by capping in particular. Again, this is all subject to seeing the fine detail of whatever the rate capping legislation is, so I'm making an assumption. They've also talked about new CCOs, the class 1 being roading. Okay, would be the next logical large CCO type thing. And there, of course, remember that roading is a co-funding scenario. So unlike waters, the Crown has an ownership stake in this and therefore can exercise leverage. So that sort of thing. More importantly, and what has not sort of been talked about in my view, is throughout this whole process, we're about to go through a review of the FAR. That happens every 3 years, links to the LTP, and people look at the FAR. So how that all plays out will be something to keep an eye on too, in my view. But that is where uncertainty is in terms of outcome over the period as you work through your LTP, and what in fact the LTP looks like at the end of the day. Then the final aspect of this is RMA reform. Okay, again, I apologise for, I don't know why it's crystal clear on mine, but not on that for some reason. There's much in those bills. Both of those bills, being the Natural Environment Bill and the Planning Bill, are now before the Environment Select Committee. They were introduced on the 9th of December, and the Select Committee is required to report back by the 26th of June next year. The intention being to get them passed through as quickly as possible. Two key activities that to take note of: the CTP, as well as doing the efficiency plan, has to jointly make and maintain a regional combined plan. These are these big regional spatial plans that are talked about, with an environment chapter, and then there'll be land use chapters. So Tararua will have a chapter in the overall plan, regional plan, which is down to the council to make, and then gets incorporated within the plan, hence the line there going forward. Similarly, Horowhenua would have one, Palmerston North would have one, and so on and so forth. Again, that will be an interesting and probably extensive activity, which will need to be thought about in terms of the LTP considerations. So that is profound change. Okay?
That's an understatement.
While there's been bits around the edges in the past, my own perseverance is the biggest set of changes to the local government sector since 1989. It is intended to be. Again, Minister Bishop, in the interview I just referred to, said they had a choice about do they just do RMA and sort of let things go, but they decided to bring this on because they want the RMA reforms in particular to work, and that's all part of it. So, and to be fair to the government, by putting it all on the table, you can see how the various bits work. This is my interpretation, because I haven't seen anyone else do it yet, and the test finished earlier in the weekend, so I had Sunday free. So I did it. But that's just to try to give you a sense of the previous environment you looked at when you did your last LTP is fundamentally different and uncertain as you do this one. There'll be a lot of trade-offs. You see there's a lot of red on that thing, so if you're working within a band, that is probably going to drive choices and in particular levels of service debate with your community, because you will not be able to afford within a rates cap everything you might necessarily want to do. Alternatively, and again in my view this is the intention, it will be to drive a look from rates to fees and charges, which are not rate capped, because that's linked to user pays essentially. So those are sort of the choices you will make. So that sort of balance between something like that will be an interesting dynamic too, because there is an element of rate smoothing and cost subsidisation that exists, which is natural, it happens in most places. But just remember that anything you do in that space will be captured by within the cap, and so there will be a consequence from that which will need to be clearly understood as you go through your LTP process about what you can and can't do. Now, the reason I raised that, if you go to the next, I think hopefully it's on the slide, there's as we looked at earlier, the snap from your previous LTP. Not one of those percentages are within cooey of what is likely to be a rates cap. Okay, so this will, you've got work to do. I just thought I'd just leave you in a cheery little goodbye, but just to let you know, this is why this is profound, okay? Not just for Tararua, for everyone. The only exceptions really are the current unitaries, Auckland, Gisborne and that, because they were, some of them I'm not sure why, but it affects all the TAs and all the regionals in one shape or another. So that was just try to tie it up into one document. Hopefully the blurring's not obvious on your screen, but that's my take on it. Again, a lot of the stuff is still moving around. still subject to consultation, and some of it will be subject to legislation we haven't seen yet. So, we'll have to keep an eye on things as they go. Okay? So anyway, I just wanted to give you a snapshot of how it all sort of sits together, given we were doing the LTP thing.
Thank you very much for that, Malcolm. I certainly found that useful when you shared it with me to put things into perspective. And all I can say is exciting times to be involved in local government. There is certainly going to be some challenges, but there will be some opportunities that come out of this as well. I hope everyone has a very Merry Christmas and a very restful break, because I believe that we're going to need it, because we have a lot of work ahead of us. I also, though, have every confidence that our team of staff and ourselves as governance are up to the challenges that are going to be put in front of us. That is all for our workshop session today. Thank you to anyone that was that had tuned in the first time that we've live streamed one of our workshops. But I'd now like to invite Councillor Tawaka to close us with a karakia.
Kei rau tātou, kia tātou katoa, te atawhai o tō tātou arekia I Hukarati, ko te aroha o te atua me te whiwhinga tahitanga, ki te wairua tapu, ake, āmene.